Good evening and welcome to part 2 of Yardsticks for grades 3 through 5. We thank you for joining us this evening. This is a book that is written by Chip Wood in the 4th edition, and it's based on a responsive classroom approach. It combines social emotional learning with academics using evidence-based approach. This book grew out of decades. Oh, thank you, Mr. Richard. This book grew out of decades of educational experiences and a wealth of research, and it combines easy access information about the cognitive, social, emotional, and physical characteristics of each group, and provides some practical advice for parents and for teachers. As I said, the goal is to provide teachers and parents with the knowledge that they can trust on how children grow and change. And it also provides insights for children's cognitive curiosities and suggests appropriate teaching activities and approaches for ages based on common developmental characteristics. It's important to consider all components of development that help us to be well-rounded individuals. And patterns of growth can depend on several factors, including culture. However, all children grow through similar, predictable stages of growth, physically, emotionally, socially, and cognitively. So remember, the stages of growth and development for children typically do follow a reasonable, predictable pattern. However, not all children proceed through each stage at the same pace, and children progress through various aspects of development at their own rate. It's also important to keep in mind that growth can be uneven. You may see large cognitive growths and spurts of growth, followed by memory consolidation, where children are practicing that short-term memory and generalizing those skills to move them to long-term memory. And the same is true for physical growth. You might see large bursts of physical growth, and then you might see children plateau for a while and not have much change. As a staff, we have been really focusing not only as teaching students, but making it a priority to know children well and know their developmental milestones and to know them personally and seeing them as students outside of school and tapping into their interests and their unique personalities, anxieties, and overall interests and passions that they're pursuing, and to know them culturally, to appreciate similarities and differences and understanding different viewpoints and just broadly understanding and learning more about diversity and learning about our students' cultures and supporting students because we all know all students can and will learn and need that proper support. So I have some staff members here who are presenting with me this evening who will be talking about the different developmental stages. Mr. Richard, our physical education teacher, will be talking about physical development. Mrs. Hatstadt, one of our literacy consultants, will be talking about literacy development. Mrs. Gidwani, our math specialist, will be talking about numeracy development. And of course, Mrs. Paredes and Ms. Sweeney will be talking about the social emotional development of students. So we hope that you enjoy this presentation. And there's my introduction. We're going to start off talking about 8-year-olds in 3rd grade, and Mr. Richard will start with physical development.
Right. So if you were with us for the last session, there's a little overlap here with the 2nd and 3rd graders with the 8-year-olds. So a little overlap here. But overall, our 8-year-olds are restless. They're full of energy. They need a physical release. So we've got to provide lots of opportunities for them to get up and get out and move. They love to be outdoors and play in big settings. And a lot of times on the playground, we'll see large group games like soccer and kickball and football become more popular at this age level. They play hard, they tire quickly. If you've ever watched Recess with 8-year-olds, they go all out and they use up all that energy in a short period of time. So they benefit from several short play breaks rather than longer ones. As Mrs. Newmeyer said, these growth spurts happen, and it takes some time for the kids to catch up. So we might see some coordinated movements, and then all of a sudden your kids look a little clumsy or awkward, and that's normal, right? As they're catching up with their growing bodies. We've talked a lot in the younger session, K-2, about focusing near and far, and as they develop, is 8 years old, a lot of times they tend to catch up and are able to switch focus from near objects to far objects much easier. And they have better control of their hands, so they can learn and use cursive writing, and their handwriting overall tends to become better. At least they're more capable of holding the pencil in a more adult way, even though some might still need a pencil grip in order to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Richard. And next we have social emotional development with Mrs. Paredes and Ms. Sweeney.
Okay. All right. So at this age level, we see children be more adventurous, social, full of ideas and jokes, and more confident. They thrive in group activities and cooperative work, much like what Mr. Richard said previously. They really do well exploring those group activities. Friendship groups, they become larger, and their peers' approval becomes as important as their teachers. So again, the self-awareness of who they are within their group. They're adjusting well to changes. They typically bounce back quickly from mistakes or disappointments. They have a growing sense of moral responsibility, and they like to rally around issues that they feel are unjust. You may also hear the cries of "it's not fair" are common at this age, much like it was in second grade. So you might see a lot of that sibling rivalry, like we discussed prior, where kids are questioning, why don't I get that? Why does that one get to stay up later than I can? And we like to always tell kids that every student gets what they need, and fair is not, or equal is not always fair. So always tending to every child's individual needs and being aware of what everyone needs.
Yeah, and just piggybacking off of that, of just promoting flexibility. So we're always talking about being flexible or being stuck-minded, just to kind of help them with adjusting to changes, or even when they make a mistake or they have a disappointment, just being able to be flexible in the moment and not get upset. And we always do that size of the problem. Is it a small problem? What's the size of your reaction? Because it has to match. So just kind of helping your child with that when it comes up at home, and just kind of modeling, are we having a stuck thought, or are we being flexible? Just to kind of help them get through those little tiny problems that happen every day.
Wonderful. Next, we have the literacy development with Ms. Yardsticks.
Good evening, parents. So your children in third grade are this is a pivotal year for them. They switch from learning to read to reading to learn, which is really an active process where there's less focus on decoding or solving words, and more energy is spent on gaining understanding and comprehension from the texts. Students are beginning to read more independently at this stage, but that doesn't mean that read aloud should go away. We strongly encourage reading aloud to your children at this age, especially in books that they may not be able to read independently. A good example of this is the Harry Potter series. It's high interest, but they may not be able to read it on their own. Besides modeling fluent reading in a read aloud, this really provides an opportunity for you to bond with your child, get a pulse on their reading and their understanding, an opportunity to explain challenging words and concepts that may come up in these books, and to ask questions to support their deeper thinking. At this age, they show interest in rules, logic, and how things work. Encouraging reading around their interests and allow them to be an expert. Consider building text sets or groups of books around the topic of their interest to allow them to explore different authors and different text structures. In writing, both their process and product are important, but they tend to be impatient and sometimes sloppy in that area. They're growing more consistent with correct spelling, and they're ready for a dictionary use, but their spelling really needs to be solid at this point. So adult supervision and support in this area would be great. Another way for you to support your child and work with them at home. Stories become more lengthy. The stories they write are becoming more lengthy and increasingly descriptive language. They're making drafts and revisions become more important. They're seeing the value in revision in their final product and how it can help the outcome. Cursive instruction begins at this grade level. Sometimes cursive writing can be easier for those friends who might struggle with their pencil grasp or forming letters correctly. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Gidwani.
Thank you, Mrs. Hadstaff.
Okay, good evening. Third grade students are industrious and organized. They learn math best through independent and partner work. Students in grade 3 are understanding equal groups by multiplying and dividing numbers within 100. That is the goal for the school year. To develop math learning for grade 3 students at home, here are a few suggestions. Have your student or have your child practice their multiplication facts at home. They can do so by writing out their facts on a dry erase board, saying their facts out loud, or making small note cards or flashcards to keep in a bag. Once they've mastered their multiplication facts, they can move to their division facts. Each child's going to progress a little bit differently. As we said, this is Yardsticks, so you'll know and your child will vocalize to you when they're ready to move on. A family game night, as we talked about in grade 2, if you saw our earlier presentation, is great for third graders. They are actually ready for a strategy game, a game that they have to plan their next move. So maybe checkers or chess would be enjoyable to them. A puzzle night is also good, a family puzzle night, or a sibling puzzle night, or a friend puzzle night. I would suggest between 200 and 500 pieces, something they can come back to and work towards over a few weeks or a month. And finally, you want to give your child an opportunity to hear math stories using all 4 operations.
Moving on to 9-year-olds in grade 4.
As our students develop, when we think about our C-Wing students in grades 3, 4, and 5, we're talking about kids that are growing into their bigger bodies and figuring out how they work. With that, we'll see improved coordination in most physical activities, and we'll see kids start to push their physical limits. And with that, they do tire easily. So you'll have kids that struggle with pacing themselves. They just go all out for a short time. So make sure you build in lots of movement breaks, shorter ones. And they're restless. They can't sit for long. So as you see in the classrooms, especially grades 3, 4, and 5, we've got a lot of opportunities for flexible seating so students can work around the room and change settings pretty often. With the age comes improved fine motor control, so they demonstrate interest in showing details in their work, whether it's their writing, their drawings. You'll see students start to create comics and things like that where they can really pour a lot of details into their work. And with the practice, with their fine motor skills, it really helps them to practice those things because if they don't practice using their hands to create, whether it's weaving, knitting, carving, or drawing, they won't continue to develop those skills. So any opportunities to practice fine motor skills in really small tasks is important in increasing manual dexterity.
Thank you, Mr. Richard.
Okay, so for this age group, we see a lot of different, personas that are being tried out for kids. It could be based on TV shows, things they see on the internet, maybe friends at school. So it kind of leads to new things like the way that they dress, the way that they talk, new hairstyles, all sorts of fun stuff like that. But it also comes with their moods, and their interests are always rapidly changing. So around this time, as Mr. Richard said, their bodies are changing, and that impacts so many different things with them, such as the mood and the interests. So they really need to start practicing like that patience, and, humor from adults can kind of be helpful because it relieves anxiety. But they could also be very competitive. So at this age, you see a lot of negotiation, a lot of debating. And so when it comes to that type of behavior, really just don't acknowledge it, because otherwise you don't want to engage in a battle going back and forth with kids with that. They could be really critical of themselves and others. They're very focused, like they were previously, on fairness issues. We also see around this time the friendship issues. This is where they're really starting to develop cliques, That best friend kind of stuff comes back around. They're really being more self-aware of friendships and others, paying attention to who's in their group, who's out of their group. We see a lot of this with recess. Friends will come to lunch bunch and be talking about who wanted to play with them, who didn't want to play with them. Friends that they previously had maybe are not, in their class this year, or maybe they're just not playing with them anymore because kids really start to develop friendships based on common interests. So if you like Minecraft, a lot of kids will kind of gather together if that's what their interest is. Friends who play maybe soccer or do gymnastics, they really start to gather based on those type of things. They also do enjoy those inappropriate jokes and exaggeration, like that high affect kind of talking, and just having to be more vigilant about how they talk about marginalized groups of people. So, at Tashua School, we talk about tolerance and how do we show tolerance to others who may be different than us.
Great, thank you. And next we have literacy with Mrs. Hadstadt.
All right. So in 4th grade, those 9-year-olds, they're strong enough to solve word problems. They might use syllable division at this point. They might have application of word patterns that they've learned in previous years. And also starting to use more and more morphology, which is the study of prefixes, suffixes, and root words. And being able to look at a word and kind of pull it apart to be able to figure out its meaning. At this age, students are more aware of a bigger world of ideas and look for explanations about how and why things work and happen as they do. They're encountering a wider variety of text. They have an increased ability to analyze characters, compare and contrast, and find the theme in books. They're able to manage more than one concept at a time. So they're able to think about long ago and far away and connect that to current day. In writing, they're able to take pride and attention to detail in finished work. They show readiness for the revision process. That might include adding details or descriptions, removing words that don't make sense, moving words or sentences to help the flow of their piece work better, or substituting words for more descriptive words or details. They love descriptive language at this age. They like wordplay and new vocabulary, and they often add that into their reading and writing. They also really enjoy short dramatic skits or role playing, which is popular with their group of friends. They enjoy using technology and social media to express their ideas and thought, but should definitely be used with adult supervision. I'll turn it over to Mrs. Gidwyman.
Thank you, Mrs. Hadstadt.
Okay, so 4th grade students are intellectually curious about how things work and why things happen. They learn math best through experimenting with various math strategies to find their best fit. Students in 4th grade are focused on multi-digit computation and working with fractions as numbers. They will add large numbers, subtract large numbers, multiply 2-digit by 2-digit numbers, and divide 3-digit by 1-digit. To develop math learning at home for 4th grade students, you could try a family game night with games such as Monopoly or Yahtzee. You could try making a recipe at home to allow your child to understand fractions in a real life setting. A half a cup of sugar, 1 3/4 cups of flour. Provide opportunities for your child to write their own math story problems involving all 4 operations. Give your child a math journal. See if they can write an equation at the top and see if they can come up with a story to match. If they like to go on the computer, encourage them to write a math story on a Google slide and share that with the class and come in so that we can solve their problem. So these are all great ways you could reinforce math at home for your 4th grader.
Okay, and now we're going to move on to our 5th graders, 10 and 11-year-olds. Oh, Mr. Richard.
All right, moving on to our oldest students. And this is a period where we see a lot of body development. Our students in 5th grade tend to look different than our other students. And that's because a lot of them have undergone those growth spurts. Their large muscles developing quickly. leading to that sort of long, lanky look where their upper bodies are often undeveloped at that point. They continue to need outdoor activity and challenges for those large muscles, opportunities to run and jump in large spaces. And when it comes to their work, they're often sloppier and hurried when they're writing. So their ideas are kind of coming faster than their hands can get them out. So it's natural to be a little bit faster and sloppier. I know I saw my handwriting get a lot sloppier as I got older. Not the handwriting king like I was in second grade. They enjoy precision tasks where they can use those small muscles in their hands especially. They're ready for tools like compasses and protractors and templates, especially in math. And those rapidly growing bodies, as you see in your grocery bill as they get older, they need frequent snacks and rest breaks as well so they can continue to develop and grow. As they move on to 11, they're still restless, energetic. They need food, they need sleep, and lots of physical activity to develop those growing bodies. And we see that sort of difference in girls and boys happen a lot, where girls experience that early adolescent growth spurt and start to grow into their more mature female bodies. And the boys, some will undergo that rapid growth spurt, getting taller, while some remain shorter, and we see some big differences in physical development there. As their bodies are growing so much bigger, you may see that they go through clumsy phases. They might have clumsy faces too, I don't know, but clumsy phases as their motor skills catch up with their bodies. And of course, they like to measure their individual best against themselves as well as against others, so opportunities for competition increase and are welcome at this age.
Thank you, Mr. Richard. And now the social emotional development.
All right, so 5th grade. The kids at this age, they're generally happy and friendly, but they can sometimes still be moody, sensitive, and indecisive. They can be defensive about mistakes. So we may definitely be seeing some level of puberty happening. So you're going to see those mood shifts. Just be aware and patient with your children. Again, using a lot of those previous techniques that Ms. Sweeney discussed before about like humor and patience. Kids can also be highly sensitive and quick to anger, but also quick to forgive. So we're seeing a lot of the maturing of the minds and body, sense of right and wrong matures as well. So you're going to see a lot of that limit testing and a lot of questioning. You might see a little bit more of those critical thinking skills where kids are asking you a lot more questions about them and what's going on in the world around them. Kids can be impulsive and self-absorbed, so talking before thinking. So a lot of those impulsive comments, a lot of behaviors that you might not have seen previously, you might start seeing kind of blip up now in the upper grades where they are doing a lot more impulsive behaviors. You might see kids enjoying spending time with their family, friends, and peers more at this time rather than preferring to be alone. You might see also kids being eager to reach out to friendships and peers, enjoying the social media. That's huge. You might see a lot of that. Worries about friendships can cause them to be cruel to each other. So again, like Ms. Sweeney was saying in some of the previous slides, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, they're way more aware of their friendships, their cliques, who they are, where they fit in, what's going on around them. So you might see a lot of this. And again, with that level of impulsivity and mood swings, you might see a lot of unexpected behaviors and reactions that you might not have seen previously in the younger ages, but they might be coming out more.
And it also goes to show with some of these peer conflicts that are starting to bubble up at this age, this is where a lot of the rumors starting.
Yeah.
It kind of progresses at this point because something small that could have been nipped in the bud ends up hurting someone's feelings. And next thing you know, this is when they start to kind of talk about one another. So it's something to kind of be on the lookout for.
Yeah. You also see kids starting to enjoy both talking, listening, and beginning to appreciate others' perspectives. So you might see more questions about different people, different thought patterns, more cooperative and flexible. Excuse me. You might see kids increasing their ability to think abstractly. So that's what we were talking about before, understanding bigger concepts, understanding
That
the fairness piece, and just how people go together and differences, and accepting those differences, perspective taking as well. Kids at this age appreciate being noticed and rewarded for their efforts. So like we said in the previous slides, very specific encouragement, very specific compliments, not open kind of like empty compliments, good job, but more specific. Kids are really looking up to us and parents for appreciation and knowing that they're doing a good job. Routines, again, starting from young through now, the routines really help kids know what to expect, what the rules are, and they thrive with that. So if we start breaking down on the routines and expectations, we might see a breakdown in the behavior. So just being consistent across all settings, that's going to be huge. Where are we at now? So increasing ability to see the world from different perspectives. So again, it's just understanding that people have different mindsets. They have a different point of view, appreciation for multiculturalism, diversity, all of that. You're going to see an increase in that. More adept at abstract thinking and deductive reasoning. The desire to test limits is an important development milestone. And you might actually see a lot of kids often behave better at school than at home. This is a conversation that we know we repeatedly have with parents where they're like, they're so good at school, but they come home and they lose it. We actually see that from younger grades straight through 5th grade. So it's not uncommon for that to happen. Kids want to save face in public, and they're going to want to show their best person outside, and home is the safe environment. That's where you'll see a lot of those emotional tantrums and breakdowns, and that's kind of like where puberty and the mood swings start kicking in too. So adult empathy, sensitivity, and humor, those are always going to be the best strategies to teach your kids how to cope with their changing emotional state. And just like, again, reassuring like the flexible thinking, stuck thinking, letting kids know what to expect before things are happening, and just being consistent and supportive throughout the whole process.
Wonderful. Thank you, ladies. And then we have Mrs. Gidwani talking about the math development.
5th grade students can concentrate for long periods of time. They can think abstractly, and they possess strong reasoning skills. They learn math best through independent work and collaborative work. Students in grade 5 are working with all operations and focusing on fractions and decimal numbers. To develop math learning at home for your 5th grade student, please provide access to technology for students at this age, and encourage them to try and create a problem involving fractions or decimal numbers. For example, we give problems in class such as Mr. Richard ran 1/4 of a mile for 7 days. Did he run 2 miles? So the child has to use a strategy to solve that problem based on multiplying fractions by a whole number or adding the fraction multiple times. You could also take your child to the grocery store and challenge them to compute costs of items involving decimal numbers, finding the total, and also figuring out the change if you were to pay with cash, or ask them, if we buy these 3 things, are we spending more or less than $20, and see if they can use their estimating skills. Furthermore, students in 5th grade do a lot of work with measurement conversions. So having your child try to convert from pounds to ounces, ounces to pounds, liters to milliliters, and milliliters to liters. We go forward and backward, and kilograms and grams, and grams and kilograms. And finally, you could propose a question about measurement. For example, there's a snake at Beardsley Zoo. It's 75 inches long. Is it longer than 6 feet or shorter than 6 feet? So they have to use what they know about inches and feet to determine that. So those are some things you could do at home. fifth graders are able to, really tackle a lot of challenging problems. So give them an opportunity to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Gidwani. And unfortunately, Mrs. Hatstadt needed to leave us, so I'm going to just talk a little bit about the academic and literacy pieces for our 10 and 11-year-olds. Our 10 and 11-year-olds, our fifth graders, are voracious readers, and they really do need a lot of time for independent reading and reading for homework. They are starting to develop more of an interest in fiction as well as nonfiction, and doing fewer book projects, but really focusing on longer term assignments, like week-long reading assignments, focusing on trade books. And like I said, the nonfiction, that's really tied to subjects that are big interests for them. They are reading biographies in science history and building timelines, and they love to read to younger children. They listen well, they enjoy talking and explaining and can appreciate others' perspectives, and they enjoy comic books and graphic novels. So it's a good time to have fifth graders, read to younger siblings and practice that reading fluency as well. For writing, they can pay attention to writing, of course, and spelling and penmanship simultaneously. So focusing on all parts of writing, they're able to write longer stories and they're developing an interest in longer poems and research papers, pieces about famous people. They are interested in writing about themes such as friends and adventures and time travel, and they love to write letters to request information. I know I get a lot of letters from fifth graders requesting information and have great ideas, and I love to read their thoughts. They love to write notes to their friends, and they're just able to have an increased use of humor. And as I was saying, our fifth graders really have an increased use of humor and dialogue and realistic description of their interactions between their characters. So this concludes our presentation this evening. We hope you did enjoy the presentation. I want to thank our staff members for presenting today with me, and also want to thank our PTA for purchasing yardsticks for our staff and sponsoring this work, and also for the parent pamphlets that you received at conferences. And we're hoping that you will provide us some feedback with our Google form that will be posted here at the end. And of course, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to post those as well. And we'll be responding to frequently asked questions in our Parent Weekly Update. So thank you for joining us, and we hope you found this to be beneficial. Have a good evening.